So we talked most about the CS resume. So we talked about how to make sure to keep it to a page, drop any outdated or less relevant experience. People expect that you have a number of projects and that you're not going to be representing all of those projects on your resume. I would have multiple different resumes for different types of companies that showcase different projects or different experience based on the company. This is the last thing on this that we should talk about. If you're going to list language and software that you're familiar with, and you want to include that, include proficiency level along with it. So I would say by the time you graduate from here, you should say that you are pretty close to a Java expert. And you can be fluent in other languages that you've dabbled in while you've been here. If you took a course that required C# or a course that required Python, you could say that you are fairly fluent in those languages, or some other things, you dabbled in some languages enough to know the basic syntax, but you don't know some of the more complicated things with a language. So keep your associated proficiency level there, and that way there won't be any questions in the interview about how much do you know a particular language or tool.
What's a good way to self-assess on expertise in that? How do I?
Yeah,
more than get in
that's a good question. I would say if you could go to, so there are open source repositories of tools that are, someone comes up with a really cool idea for a tool and just puts it out there and says, hey world, this tool would be really cool if we had it. And then people with time and energy and want to put this on their resume, come work on it. So open source projects, if you feel comfortable just hopping onto an open source project that other people have started, and you can go contribute to it by understanding their code. So you can break down code understanding into readability, writability, and are you aware of all of the built-in support, basically? Can you read code that other people have written that doesn't follow exactly your logical process? If yes, then your readability is high. If you can contribute to an existing project using their documentation standards, then I would say that your writability is high. It's not just can you do it, but can you do it the way that someone else wants you to? Then you're closer to fluent.
Do you think like programming languages certifications are worth it?
For kind of those base entry related jobs, maybe. But I would think that if you're going for something at Google or Amazon or any large tech company, that they just expect that you have that level. So having a certificate probably doesn't tell you or tell them that much. They're not interested in you at all if you don't have that level of understanding. So maybe it may be a reasonable way for you to practice or to really show yourself that you can put expert or fluent under a particular technology. One thing to avoid is listing the amount of time that you have access, that you've been working with a particular language. So 10 years of Java experience, what does that mean? Have you been dabbling in it for 10 years? Have you written one program every year for 10 years? Or is it part of your day-to-day for 10 years? Those are vastly different levels of experience. If you put in years of experience, that means nothing. You might as well omit it. Instead, have those proficiency levels. And even if you're a little bit wrong with those proficiency levels, it's a good way for someone else to recognize, okay, this is about the level that I can expect from this person. So next with this, we're going to go into kind of a timeline leading up to your interview. So what should you be doing at different amounts of time leading up to an interview procedure? So what do you want to be thinking about? So I'm guessing most people in here should be looking for an internship next summer, if not earlier. But next summer would be the ideal point. Most of you are probably sophomores-ish, maybe juniors-ish. The idea is that you'd like some kind of internship before you graduate, and usually that happens in some summer before you graduate. So this 1+ years before is probably where you should be thinking right now, or close to right now. So you should be, over the summer, take some time in some evenings and build some projects that aren't related to your school or work. Come up with an interesting idea of something that you just would like to passionately create for fun. One of those things that I did in my undergraduate was I decided I wanted to make a spin on a life simulator. So I made a GUI program in Java that kind of popped up a large grid of cells, and I had some single cell organisms that could inhabit one of these cells. And there were 3 options that they could do for actions. They could either move to an adjacent cell, they could eat, consume food if there was food in the current cell, or this lovely action called baby, which would like single cell split them in half and have a child that would inhabit one of the adjacent cells. And they had an energy level, and that energy level would be restored if they ate food up to their maximum. And the probability that they did any one of those 3 actions was based on only what they did before. This was to show that I had seen some Markov chain related math. So the probability, if they had just moved, changed whether they were going to move or eat or baby. If they had just babied, it's probably not a great idea to baby again, because then you don't have very much energy left. You're going to run out of energy very quickly. You should probably restore some of your energy before you attempt to baby again. So I did that, and the research question that I was trying to answer is, do we get a bunch of different local maxima in terms of what those Markov chains look like? Or do we find that evolution moves everything toward a single Markov chain? And there is a single optimal environment that's, or kind of DNA that these organisms could have. So I programmed that up over a couple of weeks and then blew it up. And that was cool. It worked. I was able to visualize where the organisms were. And I was also able to look at, when you baby, their Markov chain did some kind of mutation so that you could explore the space of that. And if you produced an offspring that had better survivability, then maybe they would baby more frequently and start to take over the population. So just some kind of idea like that of something that you could create for fun that answers some kind of question. And sure enough, after the equivalent of, I think it was 10,000 iterations, all of the organisms, despite having randomly created Markov chains at the beginning, all had the same Markov chain at the end. So there was a single optimum that if there was any deviation from that, they died out. Which was really interesting to find out, just in a simple system like that. So write that code and then have some kind of write-up that goes along with it that says, here's the tool, here's what I've done, here are the results of what I've done, just for exploration purposes, and just throw that out and get them.
If you're interested in the job and it's not a field that you know a lot about, but you have really good projects in like other kinds of subjects that don't relate to the company, is it still worth showcasing those? I realize you're listing your most relevant ones.
Yeah.
But they still be impressed by something that has nothing to do with what the job, what they.
Yeah. If they just want to figure out how good of a coder and problem solver are you, then you can showcase something like that. And that may not bubble you to the very top where you land that position, but then you become known by that company if you were to apply again later, or if they're just really impressed with those projects. Maybe they'll interview you, and that would be very important in that interview to state your interest in that area. And that you'd like to start getting more experience in that area, and you think that what you've done would translate well to this field because of reasons, find those technical reasons. But absolutely, you want to showcase something, you want to show them what you're capable of. Just the most relevant stuff that you are capable of that you have produced. Learn a new language, that's another thing that you can do. One thing that Eastern doesn't do particularly great, I don't think, is offer a programming languages course that actually looks at rather than learning a particular language, how are languages structured in general? If you have an understanding of that, then you can pick up languages very easily because they all adhere to the same basic logical rules. They all are able to do the same kinds of things, they just do them in a slightly different way. So looking at some programming language theory and then trying to use that to pick up a new language is useful. Another thing that you can do if you'd like to in your electives is try to pick electives that overlap with languages that you'd like to learn. For instance, I'm not trying to sell this, but it's gonna sound like it. My game dev 2-course sequence next year will be in C#, and C# is a very growing language that's syntactically similar to Java. So I think, given that all of our introductory courses are in Java, learning C# from Java is an excellent next language to get. I think it's a lot easier to pick up than C++. Maybe not quite as much as Python. Python's also super easy to just learn in general, but it is very distinct from Java. So C# is a great next language to learn, to just start to get an idea of what do programming languages share in common, how can they differ. That will help you to be able to pick up other languages faster. A very important thing to be thinking about at this stage is to build your professional network. Who do you know who is in the industry? Who do you know who can write you letters of recommendation? Try to build connections, attend career fairs. Start to know people in the industry. One thing that I would like to do in a lot of my courses is bring back some Eastern alumni to have talks, but alumni networks are also a very big thing. You can go to alumni events that also invite current students to help current students meet alumni. You can ask those alumni, what are you doing? And just ask them questions about their own graduation and their own job hunt. Ask them for advice. And just as you communicate with them, you become a known quantity. The more people you know in this local area, in this industry, the more ins you will have. It's much easier to hire someone you know than someone you don't know. So attend any computer science related events in the area. If there are any conferences that are being held in the area, consider a short road trip to go attend the conference. Even if you aren't presenting something, sometimes the state-of-the-art research is being showcased in a particular sub-area of computer science, especially one that you're interested in. Even if you get close to nothing out of the research presentations, you have the ability to meet the authors and go ask them questions. And as they start working in different areas or in industry, you can join those research groups. You can join the companies that they work for. Again, you can just get an opportunity to put your name out there and become a part of that community. So think about inserting yourself into the community in more ways than just attending classes. Make sure you have LinkedIn and GitHub accounts, and also make sure that you keep them updated. Just like it's important to update your resume with every project that you do, make sure that your LinkedIn has a list of relevant projects that you've been working on. Make sure that your GitHub has all of your code, and make sure that you go back and work on, if this is a project that you did maybe for the end of this quarter in design patterns, go back and iterate on that at the end of next year when you know more, and try to clean it up, add some documentation for it, maybe add a fourth design pattern to it. Do something that makes it a better showcase of your current level of talent as you acquire more and more information. And then that becomes something that you can showcase. And you'll say, I created this in my sophomore year, and someone who's interviewing you would say, wait, you did this as a sophomore? You say, no. I came back and iterated on it over time. I wanted it to showcase what I'm currently capable of. And you didn't have to do that. Just like it's valid and useful to have outside projects, the fact that you've gone back to your coursework and iterated on it shows a level of drive that not everybody has, and it's a way to set yourself apart. Certainly look for internships. As I mentioned, the key time for internships is between about December and February. But if February finishes and you haven't signed up for an internship, or you haven't found an internship by then, it's significantly less likely that you're going to be able to. It's way before the summer, but you will need to do that process if you want to find the internship, so really start in November.
What are your thoughts on like the unpaid internships that are like remote that you can do while doing school?
Not in CS.
Yeah,
If you're getting an internship, you should be getting paid.
So is it best to apply for like local internships? Because my only concern is like, let's say apply to an internship that's like in a different city.
Yeah,
It's like, then, I mean, do they pay you to relocate? Do I have to find an apartment then? Like, how does that?
usually tech companies will pay for relocation, but it's something to consider with any offer that you get. Look at the entire compensation package. That's something we'll talk about probably tomorrow. Is how to look at an offer, how to look at a compensation package and all of the variables to identify and look at as part of that to be able to weigh.
And then out of curiosity, like, let's say you apply for an internship and you take like lead structures and like the algorithms, right? And then maybe some like unrelated electives. Like, obviously, like an intern, you don't know nothing to do with it significant. So what kind of work did they say you can pass on doing with that kind of knowledge?
Either they have you shadowing someone who is doing work that they can give you individual tasks and you work closely with that person to get a sense of what is their day to day. Or they will give you tasks that you are capable of doing, and then they give you a certain level of administrative privilege that you can't really mess things up. But even for internships, a lot of companies will pay relocation, so I wouldn't hesitate to apply to internships for something like Amazon in Seattle. Or even Google has a local office in Seattle. I would say that you can apply to most big places without really worry about, do I currently have the financial ability to relocate? That just becomes part of. Make sure when you're researching internships, make sure that you're looking for things where that say relocation and have information about relocation, because a lot of internship opportunities will be elsewhere and a lot of them will pay for that. They'll pay for your housing, they'll pay for everything.
Isn't the Microsoft campus in Redmond, don't they have like dorms?
Yeah,
Is that where they do all of like the internships and beginner stuff? I mean,
yeah, so for instance, Amazon will put you up in temporary apartments in the Seattle area, one of the big apartment buildings. I think my fiance worked for Amazon for tax in Seattle, and her living situation was completely paid for, and she got fully, yeah, it's very good. Amazon is very good to interns, Microsoft is very good to interns. There are certainly places to attempt to land one of those internships. If you don't get something like that, search locally. I think that the goal of an internship, in addition to building your technical expertise, is to start to build that professional network. Intern at a place that you would like to work after you graduate. If obviously any internship is better than none, but if you can get an internship somewhere that you'd like to work, you will have your foot in the door for a job there after you graduate.
What's the easiest way to find internships?
There are lots of internship sites out there for computer science. I would start looking for any repository of internship opportunities. I don't know all of them off the top of my head or what the most current ones are, but you can find them at most job sites as well. And a lot of them just publish the same material. But the other one is through either word of mouth, check in with the Career Center here as well. They, I believe, even have access to some paid materials that have subscriptions. So check in with them, and I think they can send out a list or a monthly list of internship opportunities that have certain tags associated with them. So I would certainly check in with the Career Center.
is that in Cheney, the career center?
I think we have an office in the
Yeah,
county
there's an office
as well. So yeah, just make an appointment with them and try to get on any relevant list and then just get kind of the spiel of how do I look for an internship? I think that they have some pretty good general tips on that. Then as mentioned before, take classes with large projects. Those will give you some just more that you can add to your GitHub. Quantity and quality are both important there. So all of those are things you can start doing today and thinking about today. Thinking about maybe next year, this summer and next year, what can you do? continue to work on projects. As you get closer to the time, just add one more project if you can. If you can find space in your schedule for it. Obviously, this shouldn't take precedence over your coursework or jobs that are making you money right now. But as you have that extra time, think about a productive way of spending that time. We do, again, have that career center, so draft a resume, send it out, find some friends, and do some kind of resume exchange. Give it to the career center and ask if you could make an appointment to go over your resume. Again, they're not a technical driven career center, but they can help you with your formatting, they can help you with text choices, font choices, layout choices.
Is the career center open in school, you know, like, you know, taking classes and stuff, or is that
That's a really good question.
Pretty sure.
That is,
Use financial aid is also open during the summer, like.
you could also go online and they have. I forgot what it's called,
They
but
got
in the
formats
career
and
center,
templates.
they have something for resumes, you can just go in and it's like. You put in a list of things and then it just auto generates your resume for you.
Yeah,
That's all through Eastern.
figure out who your target list of companies that you'd like to work for is, especially looking at what has internship availability. But even if the internships aren't listed yet, you can start thinking about where is there overlap between companies that are doing something and my interests. Really important, big O notation. You're not going to be taking a class unless you're taking algorithms. That is going to be going over big O notation, so it's always good to review a technical subject that you know you're going to need for that interview ahead of time. You don't want to be cramming that the day before the interview. There are plenty of other things to be thinking about the day before the interview. So just do a review of stuff like big O notation. Find some practice problems for data structures and algorithms. You could even just rework and say, what do I not remember? Thinking about data structures and algorithms, do a quick Google search of common data structures and algorithms. I'll give you a list later in this as well. Think about which one am I weakest at, and then implement that from scratch. There are practice problem sites out there that are very good as well. You can use LeetCode that has tags for things like practicing implementing certain structures, practicing certain programmatic techniques. I want to get extra practice with recursion. LeetCode has a large repository of recursion problems that you can use to focus. Caddis is a repository for all of the old ACM and ICPC programming competition problems. They're sorted by difficulty. They don't give you any hints. It's just, here is the input that you need to read. Here is an example of the output that you need to generate for that input. Now do it in general. And there are hundreds and hundreds of problems that you can use. One thing that you could put on your GitHub is just a list of those problems that you have solved. Or maybe a link to your own personal, what word am I looking for, your account on any of these sites that say the number of problems that you've solved, the cumulative difficulty of those problems. It just shows that you're aware, you're involved, and you're continuing to get practice. You can form mock interview groups, take the role of the interviewer and the role of the interviewee. Try to understand from the interviewer's perspective. If you take that role, you will start to understand, how am I thinking about what questions to ask if I'm trying to decide whether I want to hire my friend or not. And that can help you to understand where your interviewer is coming from when they interview you. It also just gives you good practice, starting by speaking in front of people you're a little bit more comfortable with before you start speaking in front of total strangers. And coding in front of total strangers. So this is probably middle of next year, 1 to 3 months before, if you're targeting an internship next year. Certainly start practicing interview questions. We're gonna go over a long list of interview questions that you might want to be prepared for and be thinking about and how to generate some answers for ahead of time. Continue to do those mock interviews, especially if you're more of a quiet introvert type of person. You want to be confident and you need to show that confidence when you go into an interview. So just getting practice of showcasing that confident side of yourself is very important. As you do your practice, as you're practicing making data structures and algorithms or interview questions, just make a list of mistakes that you make. This is not to judge yourself, it is just solely for your own improvement of what do I need to think about, what do I need to practice. Try to group those mistakes into categories, and that way you can look for and search up target ways to improve in those particular categories. Also think about why you struggle with those things. Just understanding yourself, understanding your strengths and weaknesses is very important for just self-awareness. Accept those weaknesses, they're part of who you are. A company is not looking to hire a perfect person. They're going to be hiring someone with flaws, but the better you understand your flaws, the better you can work around them. About a month before, this is a month before the second round interview or third round interview, the in-person interview. Make sure that your resume is completely and totally up to date, and you should be applying to jobs or internships. The internships might be a little bit before this, but this is meant to be for a job interview as well, so. The start of the application process is usually about 4 weeks before the in-person interview. Make sure that if you're applying for jobs or even internships, apply to a wide range of them. Don't expect that 5 applications is gonna get you something that you really want. You probably want to put out 50 plus, just to make sure that the best thing you can do when you're on the job hunt is to have multiple offers to pit against each other. I can't tell you the number of times that either my fiance or I gotten a better offer out of the same place that we wanted to work regardless, just by having another offer that we could take. You pit them against each other, they raise up their rates until they're not willing to budge anymore, and then you take the job that you want. If one of them gets really frustrated with the fact that you're doing this, hey, you have a fallback option. And then you're paid more, you're paid much closer to what you're actually worth by having those multiple offers. So that starts by applying to a large number in a wide range of jobs. Make sure that those you apply for, make sure that there are some that you feel underqualified for. Who knows, maybe you're exactly what they're looking for. With a lot of companies, they will put a lot of requirements on their job application or their job site, and they don't get someone who meets all of those qualifications. They still need to hire someone, so they need to pick the person who fits the best, and maybe that's you. That's a good way to bypass some of the really entry-level jobs and really start a job that's going to challenge you, but that you can rise to meet that challenge for. Make sure that you apply to some where you feel like you're a perfect fit. And then some that you feel like you're overqualified for. It would be much better to have an offer than no offer at all. Even if you have to work somewhere that you feel like you're overqualified for a little bit, those will pay the bills while you are continuing a job search and while you work for them. There's nothing that says this is your final job search. There's a lot of job hopping that goes on. We'll talk about the common interview questions, but you should be preparing answers for the common interview questions. You're also going to want to practice writing code on paper because you're going to be writing code on a whiteboard, probably if it's an in-person interview. Or even if you are given an IDE, they may actually have you write code in a text editor rather than an IDE, so that they really see your thought process. So be ready to not have an IDE to hold your hand in a technical interview. They want to see what you are capable of without hand holding. This is why I give on paper exams with code on paper, not so that you can have 100% syntax, but so that you start getting experience for the interview process. All right, now you have a response. You know that this interview is going to be happening. So you're going through phone or video interviews for the first round that don't have you write any code. These are usually behavioral types of interviews. They want to figure out, are you a fit for the company? For people who are a fit for the company, we'll invite them to a technical interview. Before you have the phone or video interviews, you should be doing significant research on the company. Any public information you have about the company or the role that you applied for. You want to tailor the answers that you have, that you give for these phone or video interviews to the company, to the company's mission, to your role or the people that you would be working with, wherever you can, which is going to be different for each job that you apply for. So make sure you tailor your answers to their workplace. The idea is that you want to find the overlap, the commonalities between what you bring to the table and what they are looking for. Don't waste their time talking about things that aren't relevant to your position that you would be stepping into. Only talk about what you're going to be able to bring to the table. Make sure that you think about how to present yourself professionally. You're going to be talking on the phone, you're going to be over Zoom. So make sure that you clean up any visible mess. You don't want to come across as a messy person. Even if you're a messy person, you don't want to come across that way. And then in that first impression setting, make sure this is something that I don't think people think too much about. If your camera is on a big monitor and it's mounted at the top or mounted on the side, you can change where your window is, where you're looking at them, to be as close as possible to that camera so that it looks more like you're making eye contact with them. That goes a very long way subconsciously to looking like you're engaged, as opposed to talking to them while you're looking away from them. That doesn't really look professional or like you're actually engaged. Even if you're staring right at them, they don't know that. I hear this all the time in student-driven presentations. Minimize words that you say as you're thinking for something. Silence is significantly better than saying or like in front of everything. It comes across like you don't know what you're talking about, even if you do. For anyone who really struggles with this, there are local Toastmasters that you can go to give practice presentations. And you will get feedback in those presentations that highlight your use of filler words and will help you to be able to speak clearer, more concisely, and more professionally sounding. So Toastmasters is an excellent community. It's free. You can just show up and listen to that. Make sure you test everything before you join an interview. Make sure you've tested your microphone, you've tested your video. Don't be troubleshooting anything during an interview. I have advising meetings all of the time with students who are, we spend the first 5 minutes of our time troubleshooting why we can't hear each other. It's always on their end. Make sure that you're prepared for that in an interview setting. Obviously, an advising meeting is very different from an interview setting, but that's just work that you need to do ahead of time. And also do some overviews of common data structures and algorithms so that they're in the forefront of your brain. When you see an interview problem that you're going to need to code an answer for, you want to be aware of everything at the top of your head. What are the tools at your disposal so that you're using the most intelligent tools to solve the problems that are thrown your way? All right, a day before, now you've lined up the time. You're getting ready to have your technical interview. Practice your interview answers. Just make sure that it doesn't feel rehearsed. You don't want to feel like from their perspective that you're giving a rehearsal, something that you're reading off of a script. You want it to feel natural, but you want to make sure you get all of the relevant talking points. So there's a level of preparation that I feel like is good. You can be over prepared and it sounds rehearsed. You can be under prepared and it sounds like you don't know what you're talking about, or you have to spend a lot of time thinking for the example you want to use for something. So just make sure that you practice at a level where you can generate something that is genuine, doesn't feel rehearsed, but you also still know what you're talking about. You're not ever hunting for an answer for a significant period of time. Do some last research into the company, who you'd be working with, the company's mission. Make a list that you want to take with you of the experience that you'd like to highlight. This just gives you additional ammunition for the questions that they ask you. If you can tie it back to the company, tie it back to the company's mission, relate that, then it shows that you've done that research. And that you've thought about how do my strengths augment the company. Even if you are just looking to get a particular job, you want to sell yourself as a perfect fit for this company. You don't want to sell yourself as someone who's desperate for the job. Also, this is where you want to prepare the list of questions that you're going to ask the interviewer. You can come across as a very intelligent, well-prepared person just off of the questions that you ask them. If someone, I've done interviews for academic positions, been on search committees for that. I judge a candidate significantly based off of the questions that they ask. Because there are a lot of questions that you can ask that show a deep level of understanding of how these systems work. Or that you don't know how they work and you're curious enough to want to have them explained to you. That all shows something that is engagement and curiosity and part of your research. If you can ask the question, that means that you can go find the answer to that question by researching it.
Is there, in your experience, it's obviously if you're applying for a job like this, it'd be like your first stop for jobs, you kind of just gotta take what you get, I suppose. But do you feel like there's anything that you should avoid in a company that you could ask to get them to reveal that to you, be like, maybe I should find this place, this is gonna be like a terrible company.
Crunch time, I would say something like, how many hours am I expected to work per week? What does a crunch look like? How frequently are crunches? What kind of overtime pay does crunch give? Make sure that you're okay with the occasional 80-hour week ahead of a quarter end or a deadline or release of something, and make sure that that's something that you can work with and live with. You can talk about things like the company culture. You can ask the interviewer about, tell me a time when you've been in conflict with an employee. Did you have your manager's support? Did you have the company's support? Did you feel like you were hung out to dry? And just ask for the interviewer's opinion. Maybe they will, you can also hunt out kind of BS answers to things if they're giving you a very corporate level answer to that question rather than a real experience that they've had. You get a sense of how corporate you're going to be expected to be. Can you be yourself? Can you showcase your personality without fear of repercussion? If that is a little bit more focused or a little bit more, it really depends on you, the person, and what you like out of your work environment, but you can ask them personal questions or related questions about their own experience. What was onboarding like? Rate something out of 10. I'll have an entire section of questions, the kinds of questions you can ask them, breaking them down into categories, but it's something that's really worth thinking about and customizing to what you care about in a job setting. Because it is an absolutely, you're interviewing them as well as them interviewing you. You're not so desperate for a job that you're pleading them to pay you. It should be about finding that overlap between what you want to get out of a job and what they provide. Just some very basic day of preparation. Make sure I see this with exams all the time. Make sure you get sleep. If you don't get 8 hours of sleep ahead of something that's important like this, you will perform at about half of your capabilities. I'm sure you have experience with this, with exams. If you have gotten significantly less sleep, it feels like a drag. Even if you know what you're doing, if you don't have enough sleep, if you don't have food in your stomach, then you're not performing at your peak capabilities. You want to show them what you're capable of. Make sure that you don't only arrive on time, you're probably going to arrive early. Save room for all of the things that can go wrong. Be confident in your interview. Don't be cocky. There's a big difference there. Someone who knows what they're doing knows that they know what they're doing. They don't have to prove that they know what they're doing. It just comes across naturally. So you don't need to do more than show them what you know, but be confident in showing them what you know. Make sure that you're talking out loud during the entirety of any problem-solving sections. Just make sure that you're showing them how you think. Don't beat yourself up or get in a headspace if you stumble or struggle, that the interview is over or that you're being judged based off of exactly what's happening right in this moment. Try to practice and get used to redirecting yourself. This can be true for any negative emotion as well. If you're experiencing anger or frustration, you can practice for an interview setting by recognizing, I understand and respect that this is what I'm feeling right now. I also recognize this is the time and place for it, so I'm gonna do what I can to put it aside, refocus on what I need to be doing. And that's healthy and useful in everyday life, in addition to in the middle of an interview setting. So that's the day of the interview. After the interview, you should be writing a thank you email to the recruiter. If you don't hear back within a week, make sure that you check back in with the person who was your contact for that interview. A lot of people just, they accept the fact that they're not going to hear back and just move on. If it's been a week, they know the timeline. That's another question that you can ask during the interview is, what is the timeline for this? That's the most common question, I think. And that gives you a sense of when should I check back in if I haven't heard back. If you don't get an offer, don't worry about it, but ask when you can reapply, if this is somewhere that you really would like to work. Because you may have been the second or third resume on the staff. You may have almost got the position, especially if you were given a technical interview. That means you were on a short list. So ask when you can reapply. Maybe there are more positions available that you can fill at that point. You have just a little bit of time, but there are some very common behavioral questions that are asked of candidates. And I guess we are out of time, so we can come back to this tomorrow. But I want to, there's not very much that I have left to finish up with regards to this. I want to get a little bit of practice of interview type questions in an interview setting where I will say something like, get out a piece of paper. Here's a question. Let's do a mock interview, technical interview, where you need to write an answer to this on paper. And then be able to justify your solution in terms of running times. Is it efficient? You should know the answer to those questions for simple algorithms that you would be asked in an interview setting. So we're gonna get a little bit of experience with that in the last couple of days of the class. Sounds good. All right. Hoping to get to it today, but we did great. See you all tomorrow.
Tomorrow.